9, 8, 7,
Extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640.
I'm the Spaceman. This is AVFS. I'd like to welcome you in if you're driving around right now, listening to AM 640, picking up the show that way. Welcome you in. Or if you're maybe at work right now, listening to AM 640 via the AM 640 app, I welcome you in too. Or if you're listening to me right now on Shaw Direct on channel 865, welcome you in. Or if you're listening to me on your 4G personal communication device via the Stream the World software, and now available free on Apple Music or the Radio Player Canada app, I welcome you in. Or maybe you're what some are still calling the best seat in the house, sitting in front of your Mac, your PC, at home. Logged on to 640toronto.com. There, picking up the live audio streaming. I welcome you in. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. I've never gotten so many emails during the week of a show than this one, with almost every one the same subject. And it was the Queen and her hat at the speech from the throne that happened earlier this week. The British parliamentary system, the oldest system of democracy in the world, all other democracies around the world used it as their template, albeit with a tweak or two. But it was the British democratic system that was showcased front and center this past week and carried by the Illuminati-controlled mass media around the world. The throne speech, or speech from the throne as it's also sometimes called, performed by Queen Elizabeth II. The date, June 21st, 21. The royal number. Breaks down to a 3 in numerology. The perfect number invoked there. It was on the 21st day of the month, the summer solstice of all days. Yes, the sun worshippers struck again on the summer solstice. What's more, it was Prince William's birthday. He's 35, the sun worshippers' number, broken down to an 8. Now, going even further, deeper than a black hole into this numerology, by adding the month, June, the 6th month, a 9 magically appears on that day. Satan's favorite number, the egotistical number, because it always keeps on returning to itself. 9 times 9, 81. 8 plus 1 are 9. You go through it all yourself, but that's basically the gist of the egotistical number. The final number in all of numbers, because you take the sun worshippers' number, the circle, put it in front of the very first number created, gives you a 10. Then you can run up again to the 9. And then bring out the sun worshippers symbol, the O, and put it in again. And run. You have infinity. You can take the numbers to infinity. Numerology. 1, just one of the guides used by the elite, the Illuminati. The other, sacred geometry, and the final, astrology, because the stars line up in the heavens and foretell certain things that come upon this earth after it appears in the constellations and the stars above. Your future is written in the stars. They were on her hat, too, at the opening. This is A View from Space. It's all it is on Talk Radio AM 640. And I'm just getting started. I communicate by email. It's the only way. Space640toronto.com, one of the addresses. The other, Spaceman at 640toronto.com. Thanks for the ones you sent all this week, and thank you for the ones that are rolling in right now, because they start, as I say, coming in just before the show begins every single time. So, I went through the numerology except for one that I wanted to save until now. Going even further, deeper into this numerology of this throne speech this year, this 2017, by adding the month, June, the 6th month, and then adding the date, 21, the perfect number 3, broken down, add in 2017. The 0 means nothing, drop it. 2, 1, and 7. You arrive at the number 10, the number of law. And where was the speech made? In the house of the oldest democracy in the world, where they make the law. Parliament is the place that writes the laws of the land. But this particular throne speech was different than any of the others that have come before it. A foreshadowing of things to come, if you were watching closely, because I was. And I think it is, in fact, very, very telling. Very shocking. Quite shocking. As a matter of fact, some of the indicators that were quite obviously put on display in this particular throne speech of 2017, not to mention the 5-star hat. This was the first time that the royals of Buckingham Palace broke with tradition. What? You say? The royals of Buckingham Palace broke with tradition. A monarchy whose entire existence has been predicated on such traditional pomp and pageantry. It was unceremoniously halted this year in the opening of Parliament, known as the throne speech. The age-old traditions were broken. Just what do I mean? What makes me say that? Number one, this throne speech possibly may well be the last speech from the throne by this reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, who is now the longest reigning monarch in all of Britain's storied history, after surpassing her family member, great-great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria. This throne speech, if you're not aware, is when the reigning monarch travels to the British Parliament buildings in all of its pomp and pageantry, and the monarch reads a prepared speech to the members of Parliament when a new Parliament session is opened, which happened on the 21st, this past Wednesday. The speech is intended to always outline the government's agenda for the session that's coming up in the new year. The address lays out the entire planned agenda of the ruling government and what it would like to accomplish if it gets the approval of the rest of the House. Historically, when monarchs exercised this personal power in government, a speech from the throne, it would outline the policies and objectives of not the people, but of the monarch. Originally. Back then, the speech was always prepared by the monarch's advisors under the king or queen's supervision, even. In constitutional monarchies today, with democracy covering it over, hiding it, Whether by law or by convention, the head of state reads the speech from the throne, but it is supposedly now prepared and written by the ministers of the crown in cabinet. Get it? Ministers of the crown? Sounds like employees to me of the monarchy. Let me continue. As I've already alluded to, the state opening of Parliament is all about tradition, ritual, along with much pomp and pageantry and tradition, and echoes all of its past history. It marks the formal start of the parliamentary year, and the Queen's speech sets out the plan for the coming year, as I said. The ceremony itself begins with the Queen's departure from Buckingham Palace, her journey to Westminster. And the speech itself, as always, traditionally involved a series of antiquated traditions and symbolism. For instance, there's the hostage-taking ritual of a member of Parliament. I'm serious. It's part of the ritual, steeped in tradition. The hostage is always an MP. Now, if you know your history of what went on in the ancient past, the symbolism of the Queen's speech dates back to a time when the relationship between the monarch and its parliament was a lot less cordial. Every year is the Queen Alice, you see. And the word parliament, it's actually taken from the French word parlement, or the Latin parlamentum, meaning simply discussion. That's all. Discussion. Not passing laws, not having power. Discussion. Parliament. English kings and queens had always discussed the affairs in the past of the realm with their subjects, but under the Norman and Angevin kings, these meetings were called councils. But the real driving force behind the creation of a people's voice in matters of how the kingdom was run wasn't the real reason to create a parliamentary system. The real reason, the true reason, the king allowed the development of a so-called people's voice in the land was the fact that the king's army was a lot smaller than all of the citizens of the land. In other words, the people, the citizenry of the country, and the king's subjects, as they're known, outnumbered the king's army after a while, and soon, if that angry, disgruntled mob would be able to storm the castle, take its army by force and kill the king. The people outnumbered the monarchy by a wide margin then. That spelled danger for the monarchy. Just as it was portrayed in the Frankenstein movie. I'm sure you've seen it. It was the pitchfork-wielding, torch-carrying, angry mob storming Frankenstein's castle. They meant business, and you know there was no way they were to be stopped unless they were bamboozled, brainwashed, hog-swoggled. Now, armed to the like with this new parliamentary system idea, the king could even keep control and this so-called voice of the people by simply placing his loyal knights and loyal lords to represent the people in this parliamentary system and use it to his advantage. The people wouldn't really be allowed to speak, go up to Parliament and speak, but someone who was chosen by the monarchy would supposedly represent them. So the people were under the illusion that they now had a say, a voice in such things that the country was about to delve into. But that was all a ruse. There is no true democracy. Never was. And that's even true today. And so evident, I might add, today. Tell me, do you actually think your politicians are doing your will? No. They're always doing the elite rich's will. It's who they work for. They don't work for you. The big money puts them where they are in government. It's all a ruse. It's always been that way and always will be. No, I tell you, in just a moment, I'll reveal the real reason why a parliamentary system was installed. You've got to go way, way back to November of the year 1236. King Henry III was king, who reigned from 1216 to 1272. It was King Henry III who gave a law case, which the king used to hold court, you see, and everybody had to bring their problems to him. And the king would solve them. After a while, there became so many subjects, so many problems. God, court became too long, and the king got very perturbed at having to spend time there. So, on the very first occasion, it was Henry III who said, I'm going to give this typical law case here over here that I don't want to adjudicate. I'm going to give it to a discussion group, which was to meet on the January following the year and adjudicate the case. So it was 1236, the year 1236, when they come up with the idea, King Henry III. It was 1237, the next year, when this discussion group met to solve this case law. 1237, that year, a hidden 13 as the Illuminati mark their little event. That was the year, the very first occasion of the word parliament being used, ever recorded in an official document of the English crown. Remember, British democracy is the oldest democracy system in the world and has been used as a model, as I said, with some variations, used as a template for the rest of the world's democracies, or so-called. Now, I tell you, the real reason the succession of all British kings and queens of England afterward allowed this supposed voice of the people in the affairs, that this parliament was be able to tax the people. That's why, to be able to tax the people, to take money from the people and do it legally. They always rule by the rule of law. Need control? Make a law. Yes, the real reason why King Henry III allowed Parliament to form was because it granted taxation money to the king. King Henry III was the very first monarch to ask his subjects for taxation on a regular basis, because the income from crown lands was no longer enough on its own to fund the king's military expense. The military, you see, is used to expand the empire. You need the best quality soldiers, as many as you can get. They were paid, and the best weaponry. Let me walk the same thing for today. It's no different today. Nothing has changed. It is simply history repeating itself. There's nothing new under the sun. Let me walk you through the incredible, telling symbolism used in this latest throne speech that was made by Queen Elizabeth II this past Wednesday. As I said, maybe her last throne speech ever, all time. First is what's known as the searching of the cellars ritual. What? You may say the searching of the what? The searching of the cellars. What's that all about, you say? It's next on IBFS Talk Radio, AM 640, I'm Space. This is Spaceman. This is Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. So as I said just before that last break, the telling symbolism is loud if you know what you're looking at. The adepts see through it immediately. The throne speech that was made by Queen Elizabeth II this past Wednesday, maybe her last, and one of the telling symbolism rituals was the searching of the cellars. They went on. They did not disrupt that one. This part of the ritual of the throne speech goes all the way back to the year 1605. They've been doing it every single year since 1605. You talk about holding on to tradition. Well, this was one of the very few bits of protocol that's involved with the throne speech about holding on to tradition that has been performed this past Wednesday. But still a small bit of a tweak, which I'll tell you about. Firstly, though, let me explain, if you don't already know, why they searched the cellars in the British parliamentary buildings. If you recall British history, it was the state opening of Parliament that Guy Fawkes and the gunpowder plotters had in their sights on in 1605 to blow up the Parliament buildings, kill the monarch and all his cronies inside. If they had succeeded, they would have wiped out virtually every single layer of British authority in one fell swoop. To avoid any repeat of that plot scare, the cellars of the Houses of Parliament are customarily searched every year by the yeomen of the guard. They're the Queen's traditional bodyguards. That's all taking place in advance of her arrival, of course. Now, the search has been in the past ceremonial only. And I say the past because this has just recently been changed, made a little more relevant to the Queen's safety of the times that we're living in, the elites remind us. You see, it's the advent of global terror threats now that make it sensical. People go, well, what do you mean doing it since 1605? I'd be doing it today with the terrorist attacks in London, so many of them now. So today, with this so-called anti-terror measure taking place, MI5, the British equivalent of the FBI in America, domestically, this group of elite police that keep the country safe. MI5. They're separate from the yeomen of the guards search, too, the Queen's traditional bodyguards. They do their part, but it's MI5 that do a more rigorous, much more thorough search of the entire Parliament buildings before the monarch even arrives. Then, it's time for the royal procession as the reigning British monarch makes their way from the royal seat of power, which is Buckingham Palace, to the British Parliament buildings in Westminster. It's traditionally made in a horse-drawn carriage, escorted by the household cavalry, that golden coach that comes out once a year that the Queen rides and waves in. But this year, the Queen broke with that tradition. There was no gold-gilded carriage, no horseman guards. She rode in a car. Not even a convertible car. It was an enclosed sedan. The Queen almost totally was hidden from view for the throngs of people that always gather along the roadways. Next, in the long British tradition of the throne speech, what's known as the Sword of State and the Cap of Maintenance, the crown and the other items of regalia. The Sword of State, the Cap of Maintenance, are brought to Parliament ahead of the Queen in their own carriage. This time it was a car again. Now, allow me to explain what the Cap of Maintenance really is. It was first granted by the Roman Catholic Pope to both kings, Henry VII, and to his son, Henry VIII, as a mark of special privilege. Now, if you'll recall, it was Henry VIII that broke away from the Roman Catholic Church because they denied his divorce from his wife, who couldn't give him a male heir. And he kicked the Roman Catholics out of England totally, razed all their churches and put up new churches in their places, the Anglican Church, and began his own religion, basically. That was King Henry VIII, and his slap at the Roman Catholics. You see, that was back when the popes had power to name the next king, who the next king would be. The king was called by the Pope. Now the cap of maintenance, one of the insignia of the British sovereign now, is carried directly before the monarch at the stating opening of Parliament, nowadays usually by the leader of the House of Lords. And it comes into the room before the sovereign does. Kings of the United Kingdom have traditionally worn this cap of maintenance at their coronation, but it was prior to their being anointed with kingship or queenship and having the crown settle on their head, as seen most recently in the coronation of King George VI. But Queen Elizabeth's father, it's traditionally worn for the journey to Westminster Abbey, too, for the procession inside the Abbey, and then when the seat in the chair of state happens during the first part of the coronation service. Being crowned king or queen, the female queens do not ever wear the cap of maintenance. Why? Well, you know the cardinal's caps, the little round skull caps at the back? That's exactly what this cap of maintenance is, and it's also red. Never to be worn by a queen. It's female, of course, and you know how the Catholics feel about the females being in the hierarchy in the church. It's a no-no. So even in the rituals of the British monarchy, of the pomp and pageantry, that Catholic law is still honored, as no woman wears the cap of maintenance to the crown. But they wear instead a diadem, as was the case of the female Queen Elizabeth II when she was crowned, who wore King George IV's state diadem before her coronation. Traditionally, in the protocol of the throne speech ritual, as the Queen makes her way from the robing room through a grand room called the Royal Gallery to the House of Lords, she's preceded, gone before, by someone that is actually usually the leader of the House of Lords, carrying this ceremonial hat called this cape of maintenance, and another person directly behind him. This is before the Queen arrives, usually a retired military officer. First, the cap of maintenance goes in with usually the leader of the House of Lords. Then a high-ranking military officer, who's retired usually, carries what's known as the sword of state. Represents the power of the king to kill, to expand the empire. Don't be his enemy. His sword is mighty. And there's that word, state, the sword of state. It figures prominently, by the way, in why the Queen did not follow tradition, did not follow the protocol this time of wearing a crown. Again, her final ever speech could be made this past Wednesday from the throne. Here's yet another tradition of the ritual that Queen Elizabeth did not follow. The historic tradition again broken. Again, I have to remind you, the family that is a stickler for this tradition. So upon arrival at Westminster, the Queen traditionally enters Parliament, or the King, at the sovereign's entrance. Has her own special entrance. Makes her way to the special robing room, which this year Queen Elizabeth did not do. This part of the ritual is called the robe and crown. Here, the robing room is where he traditionally puts on the imperial state crown. There's that word again, state. Today's version dates back to 1937. The imperial state crown that's used. Didn't see it this year. This is very important as to why the Queen did not wear the imperial state crown. The word state, again, I say, is the utmost importance as to why she did not wear this symbol. So, as well as adorning this crown, traditionally the sovereign covers herself with clothes. The robe is next, as she has entered now the robe of stateroom. It's Spaceman. It's Talk Radio AM 640. It's all next. For your emails tonight, I really appreciate them. Space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com, the two addresses I use. Thanks for the one you've sent. So as I was saying about the robe of stateroom, where the robe is put on and the crown is put on. The robe is called the robe of state, and the crown is called the imperial state crown. But this year, at this particular opening, breaking protocol, breaking the ritual, breaking the ancient tradition, Queen Elizabeth II did not wear the robe of state, did not wear the imperial state crown, wore that hat with the 5 stars instead. So the next bit of tradition, protocol, in giving the speech from the throne, which was shown, beamed to all the world by the Illuminati-controlled mass media, now comes the part of the tradition simply entitled The Throne. Upon entering the House of Lords, after, well, in every other traditional speech from the throne, the crown was placed on her head, the imperial state crown, and then the robe of state, also wrapped around her body, would go in showing who the sovereign was by, well, just the outward look. Now, she enters the House of Lords first. The Queen takes her seat on an ornate gilded throne in the House of Lords, the design of which is based on the early 14th century coronation chair in Westminster Abbey. She's often accompanied by her husband, Duke of Edinburgh, or Prince Charles, her son, who may sit on the lower thrones on either side. And this past Wednesday, it was Prince Charles, her first-in-line heir to the throne. Then, the Masonic aspect of this grand ritual is acted out, with the Queen, the only person inside of what's known as the Voice of the People's Room. Isn't that incredible? She's the first in to the People's Room. This ritual happens. We also have this in Canada. In fact, all the Commonwealth countries have this procedure. It's the Black Rod. Once the Queen is enthroned inside the House of Lords, a senior officer of the House of Lords, known as the Black Rod, is then sent from the Lords' chamber to the House of Commons chamber to summon the MPs. A master mason who gathers all the puppets, all lords, just as masonry leads and controls all the world of business in the world. Since 1642, when King Charles I came to arrest 5 MPs in the run-up to the English Civil War, no monarch has ever set foot in the House of Commons chamber, supposedly the people's room of power, you see. To assert this supposed superiority of the Commons. The door of the chamber is traditionally slammed shut against the black rod, which he knocks once at first. And the door is slammed on him traditionally right after that one knock. A symbol of the king, of course, not allowing the people their powers and not allowing them into the House of Commons. But the Master Mason then is obliged to knock again. This time he knocks 3 times with his magical ceremonial staff, his black rod. 3. It's the magic number, isn't it? It's the perfect number. On the 3rd knock, the secret signal, the door is, of course, opened to him. He invites in all the puppets, the MPs, to attend the Queen's speech, who already is sitting there waiting for them. And the MPs follow him to the House of Lords, led by the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. So, here's the real reason, the truth as to why the Queen broke long-held tradition. And you all know how this particular royal family is all about tradition. Sticklers. The Queen, instead of wearing the imperial state crown and clothed in the robe of state, as traditionally has been the case, this particular year, firstly, she wore blue. Blue is the color of the Merovingian sorcerer kings. Blue as in the ocean. An illusion, of course, as to where the supposed bloodline came from in myth, the sea. She wore instead this resplendent blue Merovingian blue suit with a matching blue hat with 5 stars prominently seen on the front of the headpiece. That immediately reminds everyone around the world, as soon as they saw it, of the flag of the European Union. No, this is very poignant to what's happening right now, with Brexit negotiations just getting started, and the clock ticking on Brexit. They have 2 years, and its time deadline is ticking away. This is extremely timely, especially when you consider the fact that the British government has cancelled next year's Queen's speech, making this one, that happened this past Wednesday, one to cover a 2-year period. That's why I remarked, maybe, just maybe, this is Queen Elizabeth II's last speech from the throne ever, all time. Now this 2-year period, instead of waiting 1 more year for the opening of Parliament, will not happen next year. It's supposedly to give MPs more time to debate all the Brexit legislation, because time's a-ticking and it's not on their side. But I don't believe that for a moment. What I do believe is this. There's an economic crash coming. The American dollar has everything to do with it. All countries are soon to be embroiled in a trade war because of that, and that spurs on this currency war even greater. One currency pitted against another. All currencies all over the world are in debt, you see. So all this debt that all of these countries have will soon never be able to be paid back. It'll be unpaybackable. Too much money. The banking cabal are the creditors. Have you seen the banks recently and the stock exchanges having a value surge? It's a foreshadowing of the things to come. In a trade war, everyone loses. The currency war will only have one winner. The winner of that currency war will be the euro. Because you see, the EU, put together by the Treaty of Rome, is in fact the old Roman Empire now put back together. The Illuminati are following the King James Version of the Bible to the letter. And they are bent on world domination. You see, the fact is, the creditors of all the indebted countries of the world are indebted to the old royal houses of Europe, and the current British monarch is the titular head of it. That's why the symbolism of her blue outfit and the hat resembling the EU was inlaid into the proceedings, just as Brexit is getting underway. In order for the EU to be debt-free and win this war, they will agree to allow the next king in line to the British throne to be the king of the European Union. Prince Charles already asked quite a few years ago now to be king, if they would like him to be their king, and they turned him down. That was before it was the EU. The EU is the old Roman Empire put back together again. They are coming for what once was theirs, the crowned houses of Europe. They're coming back for their old territory, and they're doing it through debt. Because, you see, today's royals in Buckingham Palace represent this banking and business cabal and are the creditors to all the indebted countries around the world, which are really all the countries. So the next British king will witness the complete takeover of all European countries, too, and will be their king also. With more land grabbing in the near future, and the great conflagration that's to come before, they can completely control the whole world. So the Queen, on not wearing the British crown of state, the state has just gotten bigger, you see. It's already a foregone conclusion. She is the sovereign of the British Empire, but it's now expanding, and expanding not through wars, well, really, cash wars, I guess you could call it that, but through debt. So the Queen signaling to the adepts that soon to come is the Merovingian sorcerer king's bloodline expanding their already massive empire to include all of Europe, which will then totally resemble the ancient Roman Empire, of which this bloodline has always controlled. It's well, back to the future again. This Merovingian dynasty believes this is land that is rightfully theirs because God told them it was. It's the divine right of kings here. It's written even in the King James Version of the Bible. And when it comes to Brexit, just like America pulling out of the Paris Accords, no. They can't do that till 2020, and a lot is going to happen before 2020 ever arrives. So the Americans are in the Paris Accord, I don't care what anybody said, until 2020. Let's wait and see what happens then. In 2 years, Brexit will have them Britain separating from the EU, or will they? As I said, the royal houses of Europe always controlled Europe, never gave it up. Their cronies run that today. They also are running the British parliamentary system, so the Brexit outcome is a foregone conclusion. Probably won't be one. It'll be tweaked a little bit, but they're just going to eliminate some of their competitors they don't really want around and can't play the game anymore. You see, when the elites go into a fight, the Illuminati never get into a fight they don't control both. You'll see. Space Talk Radio, AM 640. Coming back with more in a minute. I'm the guy to call a Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Communicate by email. Spaceman at 640toronto.com is one address. The other is space at 640toronto.com. Thanks for yours. So the Queen's hat really went viral, as they say, around the world this week. And no one really knows about the protocol, the pageantry, the speech from the throne. They probably didn't even know what it was until the Queen wore that hat. 5 stars on it. Why the 5 stars? Why? Well, it's the symbol, isn't it, of what we could call the best there is, the elite of the elite. Well, it's a 5-star hotel. It's a 5-star restaurant. It's a 5-star energy rating system. That's for mobile phone chargers, by the way. There's a 5-star rank, very senior military rank. There's even a 5-star British television channel. Get it? Kind of joke there. And there's an American commercial bank. I wonder who owns this American commercial bank called 5-Star. It's involved in whiskey, too. I don't drink, but I think it is. In transport, there's a 5-star bus company in the Philippines. And in politics, there's 5 stars. 5-star red flag of the Republic of China. There's also a 5-star movement, a political party in Italy. It's called the 5-star movement. And there's 5-star publishing, fiction, books. And there's places named after 5 stars. 5-Star Island, Bermuda, part of the Commonwealth. Also 5-Star Flight Academy. That's in Westfield in Massachusetts. Also in the UEFA Elite Stadium, the former name of the place now called the 5-Star Stadium. A competitor of IGA is a 5-star supermarket chain, Australian supermarket group. I know I have my listener listening tonight in Australia. And there's a 5-star trail, a trail alongside the Southwest Pennsylvania Railroad. Of course, it's all over music. There's the 5 stars musical groups. Romford London is one of them, a British pop group. Samoan musical group named after that. There's a rapper, Yo Gotti, named 5-star. The song's called 5-star, rather. There's 5-star Productions. 5-star is the name of a movie. 2002 South Indian Tamil flick. There's a U.S. production company even called 5-Star Productions. And you gotta wonder who owns all of these, don't you? Well, I think you know now. And why the 5 stars? Why 5? 5 is the pentagram, the most powerful symbol of all in witchcraft. So 5 stars on the Queen's hat. Blue Merovingian bloodline invoked with the golden stars, 5 of them. A pentagram is showcased. And going into the numerology of the pentagram, 5 stars with 5 points each is 25. 5 plus 2 are 7, the number of spirit. You see how it all has to fit. It has to perfectly fit. And that's why the 5 stars. Why do you think there's only 12 stars in the European Union flag when there's 27 countries? They add a country or drop a country, it's still 12 stars. It's the 12 bloodlines. Period. It's always represented that. It always will. So the next British king, I believe, who will soon be crowned in Westminster, will witness a complete takeover of all European countries and will eventually also be their king, the European Union. more land grabbing in the near future, and the great conflagration that's to come before they completely control this world. So the Queen, with her wardrobe, and not wearing the crown of state of just Britain and the Commonwealth. No, there's more they're after to claim their old homeland back, Europe. And to get there, there has to be incredible disruption. Enter Donald Trump, the disruptor president. And also, it looks like that the elites in Britain are now disrupting also with Brexit. You see, all countries are very soon going to be told to service their debt. They're going to call in the loan, including the United States of America this time. Pay up! You can't, America? And America will not be able to pay. They faced the debt ceiling just after September of this year. It's going to hit, and it hit hard. That will then allow China eventually to take the place of the United States of America as the economic engine of the world, used by the elites, the Brits in control, the policemen of the world. Once America's old job too will go to the International Security Assistance Force, the ISAF. Already, ground troops been placed by the ISAF in Afghanistan and other places, and there will be more. With all Western countries supplying the soldiers for this International Security Assistance Force, both men and women, by the way, and I hope you heard my Wonder Woman show earlier this month. So to recap, what happened at this year's British speech from the throne: protocol and tradition out the window. And we'll table the agenda for Britain's politicians for the next 2 years. No speech next year. So a dressed down Queen's speech signifying Europe as the next target. The Queen arrived in Parliament in a car, too, rather than the horse-drawn carriage. And there was no royal procession into the House of Lords chamber, and the Queen wore just day dress rather than robes, but I showed you the meaning of that just moments ago. Her crown was still driven to the Lords in its own car, but was never on her head. It was the first state opening, too, with reduced ceremonial elements, first since 1974. This was agreed to, supposedly because of timing problems caused by, what again, another excuse? Remember they did this, too, with the Grenfell Towers safety probe? Oh, we couldn't get to it because of the snap election call. Well, they said this too. It was all agreed to, this 2-year timetable, because of the snap election call. You see, rehearsals clashed with Saturday's Trooping of the Color event that was the Queen's second birthday. Just a little bit more on that when I return on Talk Radio AM 640. This is AVFS
640.
It's the Spaceman, Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com. Thanks for the one you've sent. Or spaceman at 640toronto.com. And if you've got some information you'd like to pass along, or your critique of the show, feel free. Or if you just want to say where in the world you're listening to AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640 from, be my guest. So just one more thing about the Queen's birthday, the second birthday. She has two. Her real one is in April, and there's the one that was celebrated a week ago tonight, Saturday. You see, rehearsals clashed with Saturday's Trooping of the Color event, so they are agreed to, postpone things because of the supposed timing problems along with the snap election that was called. So the great work, as it's referred to on this show, AVFS, Talk Radio AM 640, is moving ahead with giant steps in the next few months and year or two. Beware of this. Be very, very aware, because I am warning you now. Things are going to get even more disrupted. When did all of this great work get seriously started? Well, it was all the way back to Nimrod, really. The idea of it, controlling all of the world as they knew it then, and Nimrod did, also known as Cain. But it was revived in earnest back in 1627 with a man named Sir Francis Bacon, who was in Queen Elizabeth I's court. He wrote the novel New Atlantis. It was first published in 1627. It's the story of a crew of a shipwrecked sailor group who land upon the shores of a mysterious, unknown nation whose people had developed a culture and technology far beyond anything previously known ever in the world. I was said to be amazingly insightful. But I tell you, Sir Francis Bacon was prophetic. In his book, he spoke of buildings a half a mile tall, machines that flew through the air, ships that traveled beneath the sea, and a government of philosophers/scientists/wizards serving an enlightened people who were dedicated to learning and higher achievement. Sound a bit like America to you at all? The New Atlantis was Bacon's vision for a golden age, a new golden age, as it was with the age of the pharaohs in the first golden age in the ancient times, and it became the inspiration for many influential American colonists, including several of Sir Francis Bacon's descendants, who settled in Virginia after its publication of the book New Atlantis. Did you know there's a group, very tight-knit group, very powerful elites that came over on the first ships from England to be the stewards of this new land, Atlantis, now called the United States of America? They're called the Pilgrim Society families. And the Pilgrim Society families are all the elite names of America's history. And their descendants now are still walking around worth billions and in control. So Bacon, who many historians considered to be the true father of modern democracy and a founder, really, of America, was an avid student of ancient wisdom, joining many secret societies during his life, too. In his youth, he became a member of the Order of the Helmet, a group that worshipped the goddesses Pallas Athene, the great goddess of truth and wisdom. Another name she goes by is Isis, Ishtar, also Semiramis, depending on which culture that you're speaking of. It's the same entity, just the name changes. It's this goddess whose 19.5-foot tall bronze and platinum statue now stands atop the Capitol building in the United States, where they make all of the laws. And she's gazing eastward as the Statue of Freedom, as they call it in Washington, D.C. If that weren't enough, every single one of America's president's own bloodline can be traced to the royal lineages of France, Scotland, and England, and wherever else the Merovingian bloodline has traveled, which then paints a picture that the United States of America is no more its own sovereign entity than a mere British Masonic proxy, controlling global events for the usurped Cainite Windsor Crown of England. All 45 presidents, of which there have actually been only 44 since they counted Grover Cleveland twice, he being the 22nd and 24th president of the U.S. So all of America's former reigning presidents, from George Washington on all the way up to, yes, Donald Trump. I said Donald Trump. You shocked? Have all had bloodline connections to all of the Merovingian kings and queens of Scotland and Britain. You say, Donald Trump is not a royal blood. You're mistaken. Because here are the facts. Both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, the two so-called choices of the American people, in the last election, they had to lead them, are related to one John of Gaunt, a 14th century royal. Gaunt, who was the first Duke of Lancaster, the son of King Edward III. Donald Trump is related through his mother, Mary Ann MacLeod, back to the through his 17th century great-grandfather, John Beaufort. While Hillary Clinton is related through her father and the Rodham family back to her 17th great-grandmother, Joan Beaufort. Donald Trump traces his lineage back to John Beaufort. Hillary Clinton can trace hers back to the 17th century Joan Beaufort. So what I'm telling you is, the two candidates that ran against one another in the 2016 U.S. presidential election are 19th cousins removed. Related. But did you ever hear that fact on the Illuminati-controlled mass media? Because neither the Clintons nor the Trump clans ever commented on that fact. And the Illuminati-controlled mass media did not comment on that fact. The Duke of Lancaster, by the way, had the Beaufort children through his third wife, Catherine Swynford. Swynford, you see, had been the mistress, but later married what they two have in common, Trump and Clinton, John of Gaunt. His son by his first wife was none other than King Henry IV. Where'd you get that, Space? Burke's Peerage. If you do the looking, Burke's Peerage, one of the most respected bloodline documenters of all time, and British. If Burke's Peerage says it, it's real. And I'm not sure if you're too new of a listener to AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640. For all 5 of elections now in America, I correctly forecast the winner. Not predicted, forecast. Because I've always used the rule of thumb. The one with the most royal blood in their veins wins the election. This last one with Trump and Clinton also had a little bit of the male versus female entity, where the woman rules for the first 6 months of the year now and gives up to the man who is less tolerant, a little more pushy in the second half of the year, beginning in the fall, with a fall equinox. Now, if the Illuminati are as cunning as the world is now beginning to see, is it possible that they have set up the perfect chess game? Just like I've said earlier, describing how they are set up perfectly to control both sides of the Brexit negotiations. The control, the British side, comes from the Masons and the British government, and they also control the EU side of things too. They have an insurgent on both sides. So, as in the Brexit talks or the Jewish-Palestinian peace deal, it doesn't matter to them who wins. Either one will carry out the agenda. Are you beginning to understand all of this a little more clearly now? Are you beginning to wake up to the matrix we're all living in yet? This information, as I said, comes from Burke's Peerage, which is the Bible of aristocratic genealogy based in London. Every presidential election in America since, and including George Washington in 1789, to Donald Trump has been won by the candidate with the most British and French royal genes. As a matter of fact, of the 45 presidents up to Bill Clinton, 33 have been related to just two people, Alfred the Great, King of England, and Charlemagne, the most famous monarch of all of France. And it goes on. 19 of the presidents are related to England's Edward III, who has 2,000 blood connections to Prince Charles. The same goes with the banking families in America. Former President George W. Bush and his First Lady Barbara Bush are actually from the same bloodline. It's the Pierce bloodline, which they're both from, which changed its name from Percy to Pierce. Then it crossed the Atlantic. Percy is one of the most aristocratic families in Britain to this day. They were, in fact, involved in the gunpowder plot to blow up Parliament at the time of Guy Fawkes. Take, for instance, George W. Bush, the Skull and Bonesman. That organization is still in charge now, by the way, Skull and Bones, with the member Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State now to Donald Trump. More on the Bonesman when I return on Talk Radio, AM 640. It's the Spaceman. I'm the guy to call a Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Just going through some of the lineage, showing you of all 45 presidents, and actually there's only 44, because Grover Cleveland counted twice, but all of them related to the British or French royal families. I brought up George W. Bush. Now, the reason I brought up George W. is because he's the one to have most recently tried to attain the Merovingian coveted goal of the creation of a 7-year peace covenant with Israel and Palestine. The two-state solution, as it's called today. The same 7-year treaty which the future British Antichrist later confirms and breaks halfway through the 7-year pact, which culminates as the trigger for the third and final World War. Now today, Jared Kushner, the investor, real estate developer, newspaper publisher, senior advisor to President Donald Trump and his son-in-law, married to Ivanka, is trying again. He also happens to be family of these royal bloodlines. That's why they marry into one another, to keep the money from flowing to other alien families, so to speak. Keep it in the family. Marry your cousin. So Jared Kushner is over there to try and do it again. Put together the 7-year pact between Israel and the Palestinians. He's over there in the Middle East as I speak to you tonight now, attempting to try it again. This ultra-important goal of a false peace deal that will eventually be a false peace deal between the Palestinians and the Jews. It's integral to the Illuminati's plan of global domination. The Jews are integral to the elite's plan. That heralds this Earth's final global conflagration when they sign the peace deal. Remember, the plan of what's known as the Great Work has always been to cause 3 world wars, if you followed this show, to make us all be complicit into accepting a one-world government. This one-world government, one people, one king, one religion, is known to the Illuminati as the Golden Age of Atlantis returned, which they are determined to bring back. It's now become very obvious that all of the bloodline-connected presidents in American history have all subjugated themselves to and have fallen right in line with the idea of this continuing plan. The very fact that such insolent men like George W., who's the 13th cousin of Queen Elizabeth II, can even attain such heights of power, all but proves the hidden connections going on behind the scenes. Another glaring example of this plan is that these monarchical connected so-called kings that are called presidents are temporarily known as the most powerful man in the world during their tenures in office because they represent by lineage and archetype that coming and final most powerful one, the one whom they call the One. The one who is the purest bloodline member of the Merovingian descendants of the bloodline of Cain, who will become the Antichrist. Because you see, like the Antichrist, the U.S. presidents must also be a member of the European royal bloodlines that can be traced back to the ancient Merovingian kings of the Satanic Holy Grail. That's why I keep saying on AVFS, on Talk Radio AM 640, that American presidents are not elected as presidents. They're born to be. Through the centuries, these bloodline families have played major roles in their involvement with the greatest conspiracy ever perpetrated on mankind, fueled by the belief that there is a royal lineage, and it's theirs, that goes all the way back to Jesus Christ himself, the house of David, when it's actually Cain. And that's their divine right to rule the world because of that. Or so they are inherently deceived to believe, conjuring up and carrying out global manifest destiny. The Illuminati-controlled mass media constantly mentions this special relationship, I've talked about it recently quite often, that Great Britain has with the United States. Well, the ruling bloodline is that special relationship. Once more, America is still a British colony. It always has been. If you want to check history, you'll find the proof. It's there for all to see, except it's well buried, of course, in what's known as legalese, the complicated language of the rule of law. This goes back to the very founding of America. The actual governmental and judicial systems within the U.S., at both federal and local state levels, is owned by the Crown, which is a private foreign power. Before jumping to conclusions about the Queen of England or the royal families of Britain owning the U.S., this is a different crown. This establishes the Templar Church, which has been in existence for centuries and is known by the world as the Crown, The temple church was built by the Knights Templar, of course, in two parts, the round and the chancel. The round church was consecrated in 1185 and modeled after the circular church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. The chancel, built in 1240. The temple church serves both the inner and middle temples and is located between Fleet Street in London, England, and Victoria Embankment at the Thames River. The grounds also houses the Crown offices at Crown Office Row. This temple church, if you like to call it that, they do, is outside any canonical jurisdiction. The master of the temple is appointed and takes his place by sealed patent, non-public, without induction or institution. Quite secretive. All licensed bar attorneys in the U.S., lawyers, owe their allegiance and give their solemn oath in pledge to the Crown Temple. Realizing this or not, this is simply due to the fact that all bar associations, legal outfits, located in the inns of the court in the Crown Temple, which are physically located at Chancery Lane behind Fleet Street in London, in the square mile, although they may vehemently deny all bar associations in the U.S., such as the American Bar Association, the Florida Bar, the California Bar Association, were all franchises to the Crown. So I mention quite often that there are, in fact, two cities called London. Each even has its own mayor. Yeah, there's two mayors of London. One is called the City of London, also known as the Square Mile, where the business is, where the Templars Church is, whose mayor today is Andrew Parmley. It used to be Boris Johnson, who is now very high up in the British government. The City of London, the business section, is a small area within Greater London. It's the historic core of London, which the rest of the city grew around and has held city status since time immemorial. The City of London's boundaries, created before even all of the bridges were built, have remained almost totally unchanged since the Middle Ages, and it is now only a tiny part of the metropolis known as London or Greater London. The city is today a major business and financial center. It rules the world, controls all the stock exchanges, ranking above New York City as the leading center of global finance easily. Throughout the 19th century, the city served as the world's primary business center. It continues to be a major meeting point for businesses to this very day. The City of London is in fact at the top of the worldwide centers of commerce. The real power in the world, also located there in the City of London, the worldwide centers of commerce. It's the legal apparatus. It forms a major component of the western side of the City of London. These are where the Inns of Court are located, especially in the Temple and Chancery Lane areas, of which two powerhouses are situated. They're known as the Inner Temple and the Middle Temple, both within the City of London's boundaries. The four Inns of Court to the Crown Temple use the banking and judicial system of London, a sovereign and independent territory which is not part of Great Britain at all, just as Washington City in D.C., as it's called, named back in the 1800s, is not part of the North American states, nor is it a state to defraud, coerce, and manipulate the American people. These Fleet Street bankers and lawyers are committing crimes in America under the guise and color of law. They're known collectively as just the Crown. Their lawyers are actually Templar bar attorneys, not lawyers. All bar association licensed attorneys must keep their terms of their oath to the Crown in order to be accepted, or they don't get in. They're not called to the bar, as they say. It's Spaceman. It's Talk Radio. AM 640. I've got more, and it's coming right up. Yeah, the call is Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails too, space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Better get a couple in here, because I don't want to ignore you or anything like that. I just think that would be very rude. CG, but I got so much to say tonight. CG writes, hey, Space, didn't you say a few years ago that in Vedic numerology it states the 44th president of the United States would be assassinated? Yes, I did. Wonder how that's going to play out. Glastonbury. Just hours from right now. Passed earlier this week. Johnny Depp at the big Glastonbury outdoor music festival says, when was the last time an actor assassinated a president? Of course, it was John Wilkes Booth. And it was Abraham Lincoln, the guy who supposedly broke from the British monarchy. A feigned break. Yes, there are so many things that aren't what they seem. And upon second glance, going deeper inside, it really is quite plain. If you follow, if you see, if you understand. Now, the present Queen of England, for instance, is not the crown. You may have been led to believe that, but the Queen of England is not the crown. It is the bankers and attorneys that I've just talked about, who are the actual crown or crown temple. These are run by the Druids. The monarch, aristocrats of England, have not been ruling sovereigns since the reign of King John, going back to 1215. All royal sovereignty of the old British crown since that time has passed to the Crown Temple in Chancery. The first chancel of the Temple Church was built by the Knights Templar. This is not a new ruling system by any means. The chancel or chancery of the Crown Inner Temple Court was where King John was in January 1215, the year 1215, when the English barons demanded that he confirm the rights enshrined in the Magna Carta. The city of London Temple was the headquarters of that franchise, comes from four inns, or the temples of the court, the inner temple of the middle temple, Lincoln's Inn, and Gray's Inn. These inns, or temples, are exclusively and private country clubs, secret societies of world power in commerce, and the titular head is always represented by the monarchy. They are well established, some having been founded in the early 1200s. The Queen is a current member of both the Inner Temple and the Middle Temple. Gray's Inn specializes, as a matter of fact, in taxation legalities by rule of law and code for the Crown. Lincoln's Inn took its name from the 3rd Earl of Lincoln in the year 1300. As did Abraham Lincoln. Oh, by the way, the last president to be assassinated by an actor. And I love the wrap-up line of Johnny Depp. But I'm not really an actor. I'm a liar. Yeah, we know that. All the elites are liars. They couldn't be straight with you for a moment. Then everything would be revealed. The British royal family are the only high-ranking figureheads at the moment. But when the time is right, one will be placed at the top as the leader of this new coming system. The Knights Templar of old are the ones who have kept the secret of who possesses the purest bloodline of Cain, and will place that person in power. When this great work plan has come to fruition, when the stars are aligned. The United States of America is not the free and sovereign nation that people believe it to be, because if it was, the United States would not have this special relationship with Great Britain at all, and would not be dictated to by the Crown Temple through its bankers and attorneys. And there would be no Federal Reserve Bank that controls the purse strings, which is a private corporation run by this cabal I speak of. This octopus that stretches its tentacles around the world. The USA is controlled and manipulated by this private power, and the unlawful but legal, yes, it's unlawful, but it's legal, it's on the books, written as a law. The federal U.S. government is their pawnbroker. The bankers and bar attorneys of the U.S. are a franchise of the City of London, and therefore must swear an oath and declare an allegiance to the Crown of Chancery, the Crown Temple Church, and its chancel, located at Chancery Lane in the City of London. A manipulative body of elite bankers and attorneys from the independent City of London who violate the law in America by imposing fraudulent, again, but legal, totally unlawful, but legal contracts on the American citizens. The banks rule the temple. Church and attorneys carry out their orders by controlling their victims. America's judiciary, the legal system of the U.S., is controlled by the Crown Temple from the independent and sovereign City of London, England. The private Federal Reserve System, which issues fiat currency, the U.S. Federal Reserve notes, is financially owned and controlled by the Crown from Switzerland, the home and legal origin, yes, for the charters of the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, and most importantly, the Bank of International Settlements. That's the last bastion for cash, by the way. The International Bank of Settlements. That was the bank that lent everyone the money to rebuild after the Second World War. It's the final stop. When the IMF goes broke, and it will go bankrupt because it's trying to help out and loan all these countries that are deeply in debt, the International Monetary Fund's going to run out of money because there's too many people wanting too much money. And we'll accept it and take it and just put it on the books and tuck it away so no one sees us coming up later. But later's now. Now. And the Crown is moving in for the kill. That's what Brexit's about. Are you kidding me? Wow. Is there a more exciting time to live in the world than now? More confusing time in the world if you don't know what's happening. Check the show out. Puts it into perspective. Yes, have you ever noticed the United States? They never print money when Europe is printing money. When America prints money, gives out fiat money, free money, just prints a bunch more and throws it out there for the circulation. The EU is raising interest rates for banks. They go the opposite way. I tell you, the currency war is going to be won by the European Union. The overwhelming debt of the United States of America, and with Donald Trump adding more on, is going to be the final straw. The private Federal Reserve System in America, which issues fiat U.S. Federal Reserve notes, is financially owned and controlled by the Crown from Switzerland, the home and legal origin for the Charter of the United Nations, the IMF, the World Trade Organization, and again, the Bank of International Settlements, the European royal family's personal fortune. World War II, as I said, forced all countries to borrow American dollars to rebuild, and they required American currency to buy oil. You had to use American dollars. So all the countries had to buy American bonds, which allowed the United States of America to become an empire. Everybody was investing in American bonds because you had to get it to get oil to build your country again. America was set up to become what's being called the Great Masonic Experiment, building it up to be an empire and then collapsing it, just like the myth of the mystical phoenix bird that destroys itself by replaced by the reincarnated phoenix bird again, which I believe is to be the final empire upon this earth. What the Illuminati refer to as the Golden Age of Atlantis. Even Hitler respected the crown bankers by not bombing Switzerland, you know. And they're right next door to Germany. The Bank of International Settlements in Basel controls all the central banks of the G20 nations. I say he who controls the gold controls the world. You've surely heard the phrase, the golden rule, haven't you? No, not do unto others as they would have them do unto you, but the Illuminati's golden rule, which is, he who owns the gold makes the rules. Okay. This is all made quite clear in the famous brainwashing movie of all time by Frank L. Baum. It was called The Wizard of Oz. You've seen it 1,000,000 times. Let me give you a little insight into that weird flick. And it'll all begin to come together for you in your mind. And you know what? You'll go, wow, that's why they keep releasing this damn flick over and over and over. It's the Spaceman, Talk Radio, AM 640. Shows yeah, they call us Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. This is AVFS. Communicate by email only. Spaceman at 640toronto.com, one of my addresses. The other is space at 640toronto.com. And let me get you one more. GR writes, Space, hearing you loud and clear in Fernley, Nevada. Loaded in Edmonton, headed for Salinas, California. Since I don't have to delivery until Monday in the early morning, I'm going to the NASCAR road race in Sonoma on Sunday. Don't tell my boss. Wait a minute. I am the boss. Got a trucking company. Keep up the great work, he says. My brain sizzles after a well-spent night with a spaceman. And by the way, your motorcycle called me. Said you'd need a ride out west very soon. This guy knows too much about me. Know what I mean? Oh, wow. And then he goes on to say, hey, I forgot to mention, it's 37 Celsius here in Nevada. So hot I just saw a cat chasing a mouse and both were walking. You know, I heard about that heat wave that you got down there, GR. And heard also that small planes can't take off in that high a temperature because the hot air is so thin. They need a lot of runway to get the speed up, and they don't get the speed up. They run out of runway. So they can't take off. Pretty crazy. Science. Knowledge. Yeah. I can build world and take it over. Knowledge. As I said before the break, even Hitler respected the crown bankers, didn't bomb Switzerland in the Second World War. He who controls the gold controls the world. It's the golden rule. He who owns the gold makes the rules. And again, as I say, made very clear in the famous brainwashing movie by Frank L. Baum called The Wizard of Oz. You see, the Wizard of Oz is really a druid wizard of the Crown Temple. Listen carefully. I'll reveal you some pretty incredible facts on the Wizard of Oz flick. Frank L. Baum didn't write a mere child's story. What symbol does Oz, stand for? It's ounces. Ounces of gold. That's what it is. What's the yellow brick road? That you and I are supposed to follow? Represented by Dorothy Gale of Kansas. The road paved with bricks of gold, or ingot bars of gold. That's why it's profit before people, and not people before profit. Get it? Isn't ever going to change. It's never going to change. The character known as the straw man in the flick represents the fictitious all-caps legal fiction, meaning you're created by the legal system and deemed a person. Your federal government created this with the same spelling as your Christian birth name. Remember what the straw man wanted from the Wizard of Oz, don't you? A brain! No legal fiction has a brain, because they have no breath of life. What did he get in place of a brain? A certificate. He got a birth certificate, if you recall in the flick, for a new legal creation, just like you the moment you enter this world. Remember how proud the Scarecrow was of his new legal status, plus all other legalisms he was granted? Now he becomes the true epitome of the brainless sack of straw, who was given a certificate in place of a brain of common sense. That's why Frank L. Baum chose the Scarecrow as one of the characters. What about the Tin Man? Simply take the first letters of each word. In taxpayer, identification number. Taxpayer T, identification I, number N. T-I-N is what you get when you put them together. Mean anything to you? The poor Tin Man just stood there mindlessly doing his work until his body literally froze up and stopped functioning. In the flick, remember? He worked himself to death because he had no heart or soul. It's the heartless, you see, an emotionless creature that's robotically carrying out his daily task as if he was already dead. Describe you at all? See yourself there? He's the ox pulling the plow. He's the mule strapped to the yoke. His masters keep him cold on the outside and heartless on the inside in order to control any emotion he might have. The Tin Man. The pitiful, cowardly lion was also too frightened to stand up for himself. Of course, he was a big bully and a loudmouth when it came to picking on those smaller than he was. They act as if they have great courage, but they really have none at all. All roar, no teeth of authority to back them up. When push comes to shove, the cowardly lion always buckled under and whimpered when anyone of any size or stature challenged him. He wanted courage from the Grand Wizard, so he was awarded a medal of official recognition. Now, no matter how much of a coward he still was, his official status made him a bully with officially recognized authority, just like the attorneys who hide behind the middle courts of the temple bar. What about the trip through the field of poppies? You ever think about that in The Wizard of Oz, the flick? They weren't really people, so drugs had no effect on them. The Wizard of Oz was written at the turn of the century, so how could Frank L. Baum, the writer, have known America was to be drugged? The Crown has been playing the drug cartel game for centuries. Just look at the history of Hong Kong and the Opium Wars. The Crown already had valuable experience conquering all of China with drugs. So why not the rest of the world? Enter the marijuana law in Canada and the U.S. You got it. You're right. I hope you've listened to the shows on AVFS, Talk Radio AM 640, about the British invasion of the 60s, when an entire generation was sold on witchcraft and drugs. That generation's known as the baby boomers. They're the ones who were sufficiently brainwashed into accepting and giving the potent witchcraft of the Harry Potter books and movies to corrupt their children with. It's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio AM 640. There's more right after this. What are you going to view from space? Emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. I read them all, every single one. Takes a while sometimes, but I get it done. This one's from WS from Aurora, Ontario, Canada. Brilliant. So tired of mind-numbing TV and media and entertainers. Example, Johnny Depp. Thanks for that. So, back to the Wizard of Oz, and a little more insight. Who finally exposed the wizard for what he really was? It was Toto, Dorothy's little dog. Toto comes from the Latin word for in total, altogether. You may have noticed how Toto wasn't scared of the great wizard's theatrics at all, yet he was so small compared to the wizard. So small, no one seemed to ever notice him even. The smoke, flames, and hologram images were designed to frighten people, done by the wizard into doing as the great Wizard of Oz commanded. This being repeated in today's world, by the way, to keep you in fear. All the smoke and mirrors to keep you in fear. We have the war on terror. The tax man. Texting drivers. Gun-happy policemen. Debt, fear, all equaling fear. Toto simply went over, looked behind the curtain, saw it was a scam, started barking until the others paid attention to him and came to see what all the barking was about. Just an ordinary person, little old man controlling the levers that created the illusions of the great wizard's power and authority. The veil, hiding the corporate legal fiction and its false courts, was removed. The wizard's game was up. It's too bad that people don't realize how loud a bark from a little dog can get and how much you can get out of it. How about your bark? Or do you just, remain silent and wait to be given whatever food and recognition, if any, your legal master gives you? Oh, and I can't forget those pesky flying monkeys. What a perfect mythical creature to symbolize the Bar Association attorneys who attack and control all the little people for the great crown wizard, the powerful and grand bankers of Oz. Meaning the gold, the keepers of the gold. What it's going to take to expose the wizard and tear down the court veil for what they really are is for each and every one of us to have just a brain. just have a brain, a heart, and a soul. And most importantly, courage. Then, and most importantly, we all need to learn how to work together. That's why there's such an attack right now being aimed at unions. Granted, unions have been tempted by greed to get all they can, which they had been gladly given by the legal system so that they could price themselves out of work. But that doesn't negate the premise that there's power in numbers. There is. Remember at the start of the show tonight? The crowds outside the castle got bigger than the king and his army. So they had to create a parliament, a voice for the people, supposedly. Believe me when I say, only in toto, working together as one body, in total, can we ever be free of having the freedom given under the true God's law. That's why I say space when they ask me, what do we do? You give us all the information on how it's going to end, but what do we do? Okay, don't go to work on Monday. That's all. Everybody has to not go to work on Monday. If everybody didn't go to work on Monday, the whole wheels of commerce would grind to a halt. The wheels of justice would grind to a halt. It's the only way to stop the Illuminati. It's the only way to be rid of this corrupt system and this dominating, brainwashing system. But very few will ever listen and do it because they fear someone else will take their job and they'll have nothing. So everyone goes, I'm just going to follow along. Remember I said, you gotta have a brain, a heart, soul, and most of all, courage. If you stand for nothing, you fall for anything. So everybody seems so shocked about the revelations of child porn. It's like one of the greatest fears right now. Child molestation. So everyone seems so shocked when it rears its ugly head, like a few years ago, the Penn State University thing. That is, everyone who's not a regular listener to AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640. If you are, you'll already know. The ones in control, the elites, are not who they're perceived to be at all. Take, for instance, the Bohemian Grove resort up It's a private San Francisco-based all-male membership art club of the most powerful CEOs and politicians in the world on the corporate, as I said, and governmental levels, located at 2061 Bohemian Avenue in Monte Rio, California. Yes, the address breaks down to a hidden 9, Satan's favorite number, the egotistical number that always returns to itself. It was founded by Henry Edwards, who was a stage actor. The club's patron saint is John Nepomuk, whose legend says suffered death at the hands of a Bohemian monarch rather than disclose the confessional secrets of the Queen. It shows absolute necessity to be able to keep a secret even unto death. A large wood carving, as a matter of fact, of St. John in cleric robes, with his index finger carefully placed over his lips, stands at the shore of the lake in the grove, symbolizing, of course, the very secrecy kept by the grove's attendees throughout its long history. Since the founding of the club, the Bohemian Grove's mascot has been an owl, symbolizing knowledge, of course. That's why they're called the Illuminati. They believe they have been taught, enlightened, or exposed to knowledge that someone who knows and is in touch can communicate with the gods. There's a 40-foot hollow owl statue made of concrete over the steel supports, and it stands at the head of the lake in the Grove in California. This owl shrine was designed by sculptor and two-time club president Haig Patagon and built in the 1920s. Since 1929, that owl shrine has served as the backdrop of the yearly cremation of care ceremony, as it's called. Now, the cremation of care ceremony at Bohemian Grove was first conducted in the Bohemian Grove in the midsummer encampment of 1881. It was devised by James Bowman, with George Bromley playing the high priest. It was originally set up within the plot of the serious hijinks dramatic performance of the first weekend in the summer encampment, after which the spirit of care, slain by the Jinx hero, was solemnly cremated. This ceremony was performed as a catharsis, meaning it was a purification or a purging of the soul that brings about spiritual renewal and release from tension for pent-up high spirits, and to present symbolically salvation of the trees by the club. And that's why the great politicians and the great CEOs of the world attend Bohemian Grove, because it purifies their soul every year. Can you imagine living with yourself having to cut 1,200 jobs? Can you imagine how it would be to take over another company? A buyout. A forced takeover where you make 3,000 jobs redundant. But it's in the best interests of profit. But many people will be out on the street who will never work again. Their income cut off for good, except for welfare. Cremation of Care was separated from the Grove play in 1913, way back then, and moved to the first night to become an exorcising of the demons to ensure the success of the coming 2 weeks of debauchery that they would take part in, to purify their soul, the purging of the soul. This ceremony takes place in front of the owl shrine. It's a hollowed-out owl statue made of concrete over steel supports. The moss and lichen-covered statue looks just like a natural rock formation, actually. And inside it's electrical and audio equipment stuffed in. For a lot of years, a recording of the voice of club member Walter Cronkite the now deceased old CBS newscaster, known in past years as the most trusted man in America. He was the man who told the U.S. had landed on the moon. He was the man that told the United States that John F. Kennedy was dead. And so much more was used. And he's the voice of the owl during that ceremony. Music, pyrotechnics are also included in the ritual for dramatic effect. I mean, who really knows of what all goes on behind the secret veil that is wrapped around Bohemian Grove? It's the same thing with that Penn State Jerry Sandusky and what was being said about what was going on with his second mile charity for young boys. It's even being alleged that he was not only pimping for himself, but he was deeply involved in a ring where they would be pimping these boys out to his old boys club's friends and whoever else might be using the services. What if, just what if there were even higher placed men involved there? Say senators, other university faculty, corporate boards of directors. Secret societies, you see, permeate this corrupt satanic system which runs our world today. Would you be shocked if some very prominent people became implicated in things like this? So many people are brainwashed when it comes to what history calls great men of our time. Matter of fact, I got more. It's next. This is the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. Else to Spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Thanks for the one you've sent me. Let me read this one. E.H. writes, "Hey, Space, still listening and enjoying your show. It's just an ironic addition to your mention of the American Southwest heat wave that the planes couldn't get off the ground the other day. Well, they were Bombardier jets. LOL. Typical for that company. It's been bailed out so many times by the Canadian government, no? Yeah, absolutely. But what do they say? Well, that's the way we roll. That's what the rich do. What? You surprised or something? What? Let me get back to Bohemian Grove and the cremation of care ceremony, first conducted at the Bohemian Grove in the midsummer encampment of 1881. So many corporate execs, so many big names that you would recognize immediately have taken part in this every single year. And for a peek inside of what goes on, you could only imagine. Oh, and I mentioned earlier that America was the great Masonic experiment. Well, Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers, was a master Mason, as was George Washington, the first president, unelected, by the way. Benjamin Franklin's links to the occult secret societies has been known for quite a while. As a matter of fact, the History Channel even had a documentary about it not long ago, about his involvement in a satanic group called the Hellfire Club. That's a secret society that's conducting black masses and orgies throughout the witches' holidays and the Wheel of the Year. The Hellfire Club, an 18th century British Satanist society of rich men, politicians, eccentrics too, based at Medmenham Abbey in Buckinghamshire, and later in caves at High Wycombe. Now, the Duke of Wharton, also the Masonic and later Grand Lodge Grand Master, created a secret satanic club in 1719 was the year, where the rich and powerful could effectively worship Satan in relative peace. Early members of this exclusive satanic British club included the artist William Hogarth and parliamentary rabble-rouser John Wilkes. In 1746, the notorious, very extravagant Sir Francis Dashwood, a member of Parliament who was appointed Chancellor of the Exchequer, formed his own Hellfire Club, which originally met in London at the George and Vulture Inn to revel in the freedom now implicitly granted to only witches. What's very interesting is taverns of the early 18th century were also the frequent meeting places for Masonic lodges, too. It's also quite possible, so, that this new established Hellfire Club was originally a front for Jacobite Freemasons who were secretly united in a plot. As a newly arrived peer, Dashwood would have been very conscious of his lack of lineage and might have been attracted to the chivalrous glamour of the Jacobite Templar orders, keeping in mind that it just may give some insight as to Sir Francis Dashwood's mocked conversion into Roman Catholicism. The Jacobites sided with the Catholic House of Stuart's claim, you see, to the British throne over the Protestant but very German House of Hanover. And there were a lot of reasons why a person might support the Jacobite cause. It's clear that whether or not Dashwood flirted with Catholicism, he did get involved with the Jacobite cause. He made the acquaintance of Prince Charles Edward Stuart, the Bonnie Prince Charlie, as he's known in old history, then holding court in Rome. Unfortunately, Dashwood just missed meeting the prince's tutor, Chevalier Andrew Michael Ramsay, a Roman Catholic Freemason and godfather of the Scottish Free Rite of Freemasons. At the time, Ramsay was in Paris spreading the belief that Freemasonry was descended from the orders of crusading knights and that the House of Stuart, the last Roman Catholic king and queen bloodline, was its legitimate champion. In 1762, Sir Francis Dashwood took over the actual Hellfire Club, and in an effort to ward off any potentially harmful Christian outsiders, modestly renamed the Hellfire Club the Order of St. Francis, although it was still better known as the Hellfire Club to those in the know. Dashwood rented Medmenham Abbey and began its restoration. The Abbey's library, as a matter of fact, was said to contain an enviable collection of extremely explicit pornography. Satanists holding power, and they still do today, still practice every manner of perversion every day, including child sacrifice and ritual murder, dedicated to all evil manner towards their neighbor, man, which is worshipped by their god Satan. So here you have Benjamin Franklin as a worshipper of Satan. Who would have ever believed him? There's more, listen. This is a story printed in the Sunday Times of London, February 11, 1998. Workmen have dug up the remains of 10 bodies hidden beneath the former London home of Benjamin Franklin, the founding father of American independence. The remains of 4 adults and 6 children under his house were discovered during the renovation of Franklin's home at 36 Craven Street, close to Trafalgar Square. Pretty posh location, isn't it? Researchers believe that there could be more bodies, too, buried beneath the basement kitchens. This is Benjamin Franklin, founding father of America's house in England. 4 adults, 6 kids. maybe more. Initial estimates are that the bones are about 200 years old and were buried at the time Franklin was living in the house, which was his home from 1757 all the way to 1762, and then again from 1764 to 1775. Both, or I should say, most of the bones showed signs of having been both dissected, sawn, or cut. One skull had actually been drilled with several holes. Paul Knappman, the Westminster coroner, said, "I can't totally discount the possibility of a crime here. There is still a possibility that I may have to hold an inquest into this." Nothing came of it all, though. The principal suspect in the mystery was one William Hewson. Like Benjamin Franklin, he was a fellow of the Royal Society. Yes, very high up. And the husband of Polly Stevenson, the daughter of Franklin's landlady, Mary Stevenson. In the early 1770s, Dr. Hewson was actually in partnership with one William Hunter, who, with his brother John, was one of the founders of British surgery. Dr. Hunter and Dr. Hewson ran a school of anatomy in Soho. But after an argument, Dr. Hewson left to live in Franklin's house, Benjamin Franklin's house, where he's believed to have established a rival school and lecture theater there. Dr. Knappman added, "It's almost likely that these are anatomical specimens that Dr. Hewson disposed of in his own house, but we're still not certain about the bones' exact age or origin." Evangeline Hunter-Jones, deputy chairman of the Friends of Benjamin Franklin House, the charity concerned with restoring the property and opening it to the public, said, "The bones were quite deeply buried, probably to hide them because grave robbing was illegal. There could be more buried, and there probably are." Brian Owen Smith, he volunteered to lead researchers on behalf of the Friends. He said the discovery represents an important insight into very exciting years of medical history. Benjamin Franklin, through his support for Polly and Dr. Hewson, socially and scientifically, was very much part of that. So the suggestion that Benjamin Franklin, founding father of the United States, one of them, might have been a grave robber or an accomplice to Dr. Hewson. It's Spaceman Talk Radio, AM 640. Is there more? Yes. Right after this break. I'm the guy they call the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to spaceman@640toronto.com or space@640toronto.com. Thanks for the one you've sent. Really appreciate it. Tonight, Benjamin Franklin. I've been talking about Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the American country, the United States of America. Franklin was the one, I believe, who wrote the opening words, even, to the United States Declaration of Independence. He continued to support the widowed Polly, and when he returned to Philadelphia, he actually invited her there to live as his neighbor. Both her sons became eminent medical men, as have successive generations of the Hewsons in America. Hewson, of course, living in Benjamin Franklin's house in England after Benjamin Franklin went to America. Franklin was also a Rosicrucian Grand Master, I'll have you know, who was at the heart of the Illuminati operations to take over America and replace the visible control of the British Empire with the invisible control of the Secret Brotherhood, the most effective and ongoing form of mastering the underclass. It's said the Illuminati, via the Freemasons, control and manipulate both sides. And that included the American War of Independence. And we're also deeply connected with the French Revolution back in 1789. Benjamin Franklin was agent number 72 of the British Intelligence Agency. I know another 9. It was created by this British Intelligence Agency, created by none other than Dr. John Dee and Francis Bacon during the reign of Elizabeth I. Very occult time in British history. John Dee, by the way, was the very first James Bond. The real 007. And the signature of 007 is actually 2 balls and a cane. 2-ball cane. The bloodline. John Dee was the eyes in Elizabeth I's court and snuffed out any enemy the Queen may have had. As for Francis Bacon, well, Sir Francis Bacon, I believe, rewrote the King James Version of the Bible. A scientist who created much with the knowledge that he was given by the bloodline, the royal bloodline, who keeps all of that ancient black magic ritual ways to control people. From Enoch, the Book of Enoch, which was King Solomon's forte, conjuring up demons and casting spells. So, during their time in London, Dr. John Dee, Francis Bacon, Queen Elizabeth I, Franklin and the professor were brought into contact with those in positions of power who shared the Masonic and occult interests. One of these was Sir Francis Dashwood, the English Chancellor of the Exchequer, who I talked about earlier, who was also the founder of the secret society called the Friars of St. Francis of Wycombe, more popularly known as known in the parlors of London as that club called the Hellfire Club. So, if all of this is true about the so-called great men of our time being deeply involved in Satanism and all manner of debauchery, as I'm purporting that they are, and the fact that these men of high position are actually controlling every facet of our world, are now being exposed for who they really and truly are, and who they worship. So now you've got to ask yourself one very poignant question, and that question is, why do they allow their precious members to be found out, exposed, uncovered? The answer is twofold, and quite simple, really. The first is the Satanists want to worship their God in the open for everyone to see. This is the way it was in the ancient past. They deeply desire to return to that, to have prominent, successful, rich people exposed as sacrifice for the cause. Then the world will see the secret of what it takes to be that, and will want it for themselves. Wow, if I performed those things, those tasks, I could reach those pinnacles of power. The hedonistic way of life. The word Satanism got nothing to do with the Christian version of Satan, by the way. I use it only to describe a system of ritual sacrifice and torture, which, staggering as it may seem to most people, it's commonplace all over the world today. Satanism is just another name for the worship of a higher destructive negative force, which has been given endless names over the centuries, like Nimrod, Baal, Moloch, Set, the devil, Lucifer. There's no end to them. Satanism perverts everything positive in a way that the Nazis took a positive symbol, the swastika, a sun symbol, and turned it around backwards to symbolize the negative. When the adepts saw that Adolf Hitler used the goodwill, sun-worshipping symbol of the swastika and reversed it, they knew he was going to deploy black magic. The original swastika, as I said, is a symbol of sun worship. It's the sun wheel, the 4 seasons, each of the arms. It was an equilateral cross with its arms bent at right angles. Earliest archaeological evidence of the swastika-shaped ornaments dates back, to the Indus Valley civilization of ancient India. Swastikas have been used in every other various ancient civilization around the world, still used today in East Indian religions, as in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. It's a sacred symbol meaning good luck, unless you reverse it. The swastika is also a Chinese character used in East Asia representing eternity. For the same reasons the Nazis took a positive symbol, the swastika, and turned it around towards the backwards and symbolized the negative. It's why Satanists invert the pentagram and why they use black to symbolize the darkness, which is why they have their black mass. But they also reverse the symbolism of white. That is a powerful negative color to them. The satanic networks under the names of their various deities were created by the Babylonian Brotherhood of the Snake to serve their needs. Surely you've heard the accounts of the Watchers, who are the extraterrestrials, we're told, and their offspring, the Nephilim, mentioned even in the King James Version of the Bible, include references to their blood-drinking activities. And it's another reason for the constant use of the color gold by the royal bloodlines. Gold is called the metal of the gods, but to the Anunnaki of the Sumerian tablets, menstrual blood was the real gold of the gods. The demons and their crossbreeds and the Illuminati drink blood because they are drinking the person's life force, they believe, and taking on with power of that person sacrificed. Blood drinking is in their religion, and Satanists prefer sacrifices of the Aryan people around the world because the blood of the white race is particularly important to them for some reason, and the blonde-haired, blue-eyed genetic stream is the one desired most of all for their life force power. Just simply watch for missing children who have blonde hair, blue eyes, around Halloween or Beltane, the high witching sabbats for ritual sacrifice. Legend has it that the demons had followed the white race to Mars and then came to Earth with them. This is why Mars is the next planet to visit by the very occult institution called NASA. It's all really symbolic because Mars is the planet of war, and that's where we're headed. Next stop for Earth? War. Mars. Get it? Satanism is based on the manipulation of energy and consciousness. These deeply sick rituals created by an energy field, a vibrational frequency, which connects the consciousness of the participants to the demon and other consciousnesses of lower fourth dimension or the spirit world. This is the dimensional field, also known as the lower astral plane to many people, which resonates to the frequency of low vibrational emotions like fear, guilt, hate, things like that. When a ritual focuses these emotions, as Satanism does, a powerful connection is made with the lower fourth dimension of the fourth dimension and the Satanists. These are some of the demons which these rituals have been designed to summon since this whole thing began thousands of years ago. This is when so much possession takes place, and the reptilians take over the initiate's physical body. These rituals always take place on vortex points. And so the Illuminati believe that this terror, this horror, hatred created by them enters the global energy grid and actually affects the Earth's magnetic field. They believe thought forms of that scale of malevolence hold down the vibrational frequency and affect human thought even, and human emotion. Now, if you've ever gone to a place where satanic rituals have taken place, for instance, like, say the pyramid of Kukulkan, known as El Castillo, and a name given to the Spanish conquistadors, is the central pyramid of Chichen Itza in Mexico. And people who have visited there, they can attest. They tell you they can feel the malevolence and fear in the atmosphere. What we call atmosphere is the vibrational field and how it's been affected by human thought forms. So we talk about a happy, light, or loving atmosphere, or a dark, foreboding one. The Illuminati believe the closer the Earth's field is vibrationally to the lower fourth dimension, or the spirit realm, because we're living in the third dimension, the more power the demons have over this world and its inhabitants. Satanism isn't just a sickness and a perversion. Its main reason for existence, from the Brotherhood of the Snake's point of view, is to control the Earth's magnetic field, therefore controlling the people walking on it in this third dimension. I'm the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. Hang around, because there's a lot more coming up. One more hour. I'm the guy to call the Spaceman. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails to space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Thanks so much for the one you sent. Here's another origin of the concept of the scapegoat, the one killed for his sins of others. This, of course, manifests itself in many mythical religious heroes who died so our sins could be forgiven. The sacrifice of the king or ruler to appease the gods is another ancient tradition. So the so-called cradle of civilization, North Africa, and the Near East, where the Anunnaki and the Watchers, or extraterrestrials as they're called today, were documented. There were many human sacrifices, mostly of children. Similarly, rituals were prevalent in China, Rome, Africa, Asia, Greece, South America. Doesn't matter where you go. And most famously in Mexico, where the Aztecs sacrificed en masse to the gods at Chichen Itza. This region is where the former president of Mexico, Miguel de la Madrid, told the mind control slave of the CIA, Kathy O'Brien, that the reptile extraterrestrials came down and created physical bodies to occupy, just as they did most profusely among the Aryan people. The reptilians and human sacrifice go together. The Scandinavians actually buried children alive in an effort to stop plagues and to appease the great god of the north, the Scandinavian Odin, or the German Woden, or Woden, also pronounced that way. The gods of the mystery schools were always connected to human sacrifice. That's why I know when the wheel of the year turns around and lands on those witches' sabbats, I know what's about to happen. As I said, the gods of the mystery schools were always connected to human sacrifice, and it was the very schools, those very schools, which have, via the now global Brotherhood of the Snake and Satanism networks, carried the knowledge and the rituals into the present day. The Incas of Peru sacrificed children, Human sacrifice was practiced from the earliest days in Europe. One Druid ritual was to bury a child under the foundations of a new building or to sprinkle the child's blood on the site. This same ritual is found in many parts of the world in the stories of St. Columba, meaning dove, by the way, Columba. The symbol representing Semiramis, the wife of Nimrod, this Christian hero is said to have told his monks that it was fitting for one of them to be buried in the foundations of a new monastery on the Scottish island of Iona. Iona, by the way, means the sun. To hallow the ground, he said, to make it holy. A Saint Oran volunteered, and as a result it was believed he went straight to heaven. Roman accounts by the historian Tacitus actually reveal how the Druids deemed it a duty to cover their altars with the blood of their captives, and how they consulted the gods via human entrails. The same stories can be found in Ireland, Scotland. Irish myth even says that Ireland was first peopled by a greedy group of gods called the Fomorians, who demanded 2/3 of the children born each year to die. The Phoenicians and their relatives, the Carthaginians, sacrificed humans on a large scale, and so did the Canaanites. When Carthage was struggling in the war against Rome, 200 noble families actually sacrificed their sons to Baal, the Phoenician sun god. Another satanic ritual is the sacrifice of the firstborn child. Most often the firstborn son. In some Aboriginal tribes in Australia, the mother would kill and eat the firstborn child to ensure she would be able to have more. The sacrifice of the firstborn of animals and humans is very common and is mentioned, in fact, in the Old Testament of the King James Version of the Bible. The Book of Kings tells how Mesha, the king of Moab, was so distraught by his defeat at the hands of the Israelites that he sacrificed his eldest son and heir. In Genesis, and the King James Version of the Bible explained is how God, the gods, insisted that Abraham sacrifice his firstborn son to them to test his faith and obedience. The same ritual continues today among the Satanists. The bloodline families of the Brotherhood of the Snake, sacrificing a son, is used by these strange people as a way of testing a person's commitment to the cause. That's why many of today's captured so-called terrorists are from elite rich families like the underwear bomber Umar Farouk Abdul Matulab. Remember him? He's the son of Ahaji Matulab, a Nigerian businessman who was described by the Times in 2009 as being one of the richest men in Africa and a former chairman of the First Bank of Nigeria and former Nigerian Federal Commissioner for Economic Development. His mother, Aisha, is the second of his father's 2 wives. Now, the King James Version of the Bible says that Abraham came from the city Sumer of Ur, and excavations in 1927 by Leonard Woolley, the Royal Cemetery, revealed a lot of evidence of human sacrifice in graves dating from about 2800 BC. The Scythians, the people who transported many of the Aryan bloodlines and rituals into Europe, did the same. Evidence of human sacrifice, especially children, is found among the main locations and peoples of the world, including the palace of Knossos on Crete. The cult of the skull is a focus of ritual. It's recurred over and over again in stories involving the Templars, or in La Chateau mystery, the secret society known as the Skull and Bones. By examining bodies of what's known as the Peking Man right up to the Neanderthal man, dating from 1,000 years ago, thousands of years ago, evidence to sacrifice rituals can be found. You see, the Illuminati are purposely embedding their religion into our education and teaching it to us all because they want to one day go back to doing it in public, in the open. Normalize it. Have it accepted. To bring it out in the open and get everyone to worship. Hollywood and the motion picture business is doing the same thing. There are so many ghastly movies out. They slowly have gotten more and more grotesque and satanic brainwash type movies. Many into brainwashing people into accepting and making it commonplace and going deeper and deeper into Satanism. You may have seen the movie Silence of the Lambs with Anthony Hopkins, Jodie Foster. That flick promotes what's known as, in the demonic worshipping world, as the cult of the head, which includes eating the brain of the victim. The cult becomes even more elaborate. In Jericho, some 8,000 years ago, and evidence of the same rituals having been found in the Shinto religion in Japan and in China. Anath, the legendary sister of Baal, was portrayed festooned with severed heads, along with human hands hanging from her girdle, the same as the mother goddess of Mexico and India. Written texts of ancient Egypt reveal many kinds of sacrifice and torture, which later spread the world over. The Egyptians would sacrifice red-headed men on the tomb of Osiris because red, you see, was the color associated with Set, the Egyptian version of Satan, the evil brother of Osiris, who eventually killed Osiris. Some rituals recalled by people today who have suffered indescribably in these horrors mirror those details in the Egyptian Book of the Dead and include keeping hearts in a jar. The hearts are placed on the scales in Egypt in ancient times to be weighed for judgment by the goddess Mat. I've spoken about this ritual a few times before on AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640. This is the real meaning of the woman with the sun crown holding the scales of justice, which you see on so many court buildings. In the ancient world, the Brahmin fakirs in India and other mystery schools knew of drugs, torture rituals, and magic, which created illusions. All of these ways of producing hallucinations were used in the temples originally. The demon worshippers of Baal, Nimrod in Canaan, Babylon, Phoenicia practiced human sacrifice, cannibalism even, child murder, all done in the name of Moloch, which was an aspect of Nimrod, Baal ritual worship. Baal, meaning lord or ruler, was the supreme god of the Canaanites, the Phoenicians, and said to be the giver of life, and Moloch was the destroyer of life. And both demanded appeasement by sacrifice. Baal or Moloch was carried on through to the next empire and became identified with the Roman god of Saturn, in honor of Baal this time, the sun god and god of fire. It's the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640, with more following this. And it's Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to me at space@640toronto.com or spaceman@640toronto.com. Now, the ritual names for the demons are still the same today as those used in the ancient world and by later groups like the Templars. Confirmation of this comes actually from a stream of accounts by modern victims of Satanism. They'll tell you the word Satan is used more frequently than any other, but other demons include Baphomet, Behemoth, Moloch seems to be one particularly associated with eating babies, and one called Choronzon. There seems to be a particular involvement with sacrificing of babies with Choronzon. It relates to Kronos, the Greek version of Nimrod. According to Greek myth of Kronos, Kronos would swallow his children as fast as they were born because he feared they would overthrow him. So he ate them. Kronos was the most powerful of Titans. Titans is the Greek name for the giants who resulted from the inbreeding of the Anunnaki, or demons, and fallen angels with humans. Daughters of men, known as the Nephilim. Greek mythology symbolically refers to them as children of the union between heaven, extraterrestrials, and earth, humans. The movie that came out, called The Immortals, has that myth as its origin. Kronos was the father of Zeus, who survived because his mother hid from her child-killing husband, this one called Zeus. And so Zeus later waged a victorious war against his father and other titans, and then ruled as the king of the gods over a dynasty simply laced with child sacrifice, and Kronos' fears were realized. His kid finally got him. As you connect the different peoples across the generations from empire to empire, you find the same themes of human sacrifice. The Canaanite tribes were heavily into the sacrifice of humans and animals, as much as their spin doctors have tried to deny it over the years. And the Satanists among the Enochian hierarchy in Israel today still perform the same rituals, with the mass of the Jewish people worldwide having no idea what's going on. Stories throughout the centuries, to the present day, even to the sacrifice of children by Jewish fanatics at the time of the Passover, can be seen to have an historical basis when you realize the true meaning of the Passover. It has nothing to do with God passing over the homes of Israelite children and killing only the firstborn Egyptians. This is more symbolism that only an initiate or a determined researcher would understand. Records from the 8th, 7th centuries BC show the Israelites burning their sons on sacrificial fires in the valley of Kenianon, outside of Jerusalem. The infants were said to have been passed over or passed through the fire in sacrifice to Baal. In the books of Leviticus, in the King James Version of the Bible, you find the line, "Thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Moloch." I just told you what the real meaning is. The prophet Jeremiah talks of the people burning their sons in the fire as burnt offerings unto Baal, and also in the book of Jeremiah. This is also repeated. They built the high places of Tophet, which is in the valley of Hinnom, to burn their sons and daughters in the fire. John Milton also wrote of Moloch in his Paradise Lost. It goes, "First, Moloch, horrid king, besmirched with blood of human sacrifice and parents' tears, though for the noise of drums and timbrels loud, their children's cries unheard that passed through fire to his grim idol." Yeah, they make noise, you see, when the kids scream, so you can't hear it. The Old Testament of the King James Version of the Bible is chock full of stories with animal and human sacrifice in it. This radio show, just because it turned this way a little bit, doing no more than if you read the Bible. Same symbolism seen in a stream of ancient texts about the sacrifice of the firstborn of young children. The Jesus story even includes this theme also. It's almost too extreme. Their temples were slaughterhouses, with a constant supply of animals taken there for ritual murder and sacrifice. The Brotherhood of the Snake bloodlines, the ancient rituals have been strictly maintained, and the ruling elite today are sacrificing children and drinking blood the same way as they did in the ancient times, in the ancient world, for the same reason. Power. Power to appease the demons that will grant you your wish. Children, or so-called young virgins, are used in sacrificial rituals because the Satanists and their demonic masters want to access the pure, pre-pubescent energy for their own purposes. A lot of Satanist victims, and by therapists working with these victims, have admitted the same stories of regeneration rituals. The aging Satanist, sometimes a high-ranking member of the Brotherhood of the Snake, stands in the center of a circle of babies, of young children, as they are sacrificed. The ritual allows the Satanist to absorb their life essence, their life force, and regenerates his or her aging body, supposedly. The world-famous Satanist would have to be Aleister Crowley, who's been showcased many times on this radio show, who had connections with both Winston Churchill and the Nazis, advocated human sacrifice, admitted to sacrificing children. In his 1929 book, Magic, In Theory and Practice, he explains the reasons for ritual death and why small boys are the best victims. Crowley adds a footnote that, according to the records of the Satanist Frater Parapo, he performed just those types of sacrifice 150 times every year between 1912 and 1928. Think about that. It means that this one man ritually sacrificed 2,500 young boys in his lifetime. So, do you still wonder what happens to many of the thousands of children who go missing every year all over the world, never heard from again? And that's without all of those that are actually bred for sacrifice that the public knows nothing of. So you can begin to see the estimate of ritual sacrifices every year are no exaggeration. Satanism is at the core of the manipulation and theft of another person's energy and consciousness. In olden times, they called it soul snatching. It may appear to be merely a sickening perversion, but those who truly understand the background to these rituals know what really matters is the effect of the rituals, not so much the rituals themselves. They are the means to an end, stealing or manipulating energy. Sex is so common in satanic rituals because at the moment of orgasm, the body explodes with energy, which the Satanists and the reptilians can capture and absorb. Sexual activity inspired by love resonates to a much higher vibration, and so cannot be accessed by the demons. Sex during a satanic ritual or sacrifice, though, explodes the orgasmic energy at a very low frequency because of the intent involved, and so the energy of satanic sex resonates to the demonic frequency picked up by the spirits. The astrological energies, constantly generated by the movement of the planets and the cycles and the sun and the moon, are also employed to add to the power of these rituals. That's why the rituals must occur at certain times of the year only. So there are particular satanic days for the most important ceremonies. Now, singer Joan Baez actually sang a song about recalling childhood abuse herself as the amnesiac barriers began to fall. The mind control breaks down and the memories come flashing back. Hear the words that capture the feelings of such people magnificently by Joan Baez. The song goes, "You don't have to play me backwards to get the meaning of my verse. You don't have to die and go to hell to feel that devil's curse. While I thought my life was a photograph on the family Christmas card, kids all dressed in buttons and bows and lined up in the yard. Were the golden days of childhood so lyrical and warm? Or did the picture start to fade on the day that I was born? Let the night begin. There's a pop of skin and a sudden rush of scarlet. there's a little boy riding on a goat's head, and a little girl playing the harlot. There's a sacrifice in an empty church of sweet little baby rose, and a man in a mask from Mexico is peeling off my clothes. I've seen them light the candles. I've heard them beat the drum, and I've cried, "Mama, Mama, I'm cold as ice, and I've got no place to run." So I'm paying for protection, smoking out the truth, chasing recollections, nailing down that proof. I'll stand before your altar and tell everything I know. I've come to claim my childhood at the chapel of Baby Row. Make of it what you will. Spaceman, Talk Radio. AM 640, the show's AVFS. So much for emails. 2 addresses to write, because I communicate with email only. Space at 640toronto.com or spaceman at 640toronto.com. Thank you so much from wherever you wrote from during tonight's show. I really appreciate it. I thank you so much. Now, the Key of Solomon. It's a book of occult magic, which legend claims, was written by King Solomon himself, with all of his rituals and how to control people and how to contact demons. You remember the Pokemon phenomenon? It is exactly the same premise as Solomon's black magic. Summoning demons, going to certain places, discovering them, and taming them. It was all about what's in the Key of Solomon. So the Pokemon craze was in fact actually teaching young people how to call up spirits in the demonic world. The Key of Solomon, that book, includes the pentagram in its instructions of how to invoke demons and how to make sacrifices to demons. I told you the pentagram is, at the very start of the show, the most powerful shape in all of witchcraft. Ancient works like that provide the foundations for the same rituals in each generation. The inner core of the Knights Templar were involved in black magic ritual, and the Templars were accused of what today we call Satanism, and of rejecting Christianity by denying Christ and spitting on the cross. They're also said to worship a demon power called Baphomet, a black magic symbol known as the Goat of Mendes. Also Capricorn, the goat, also symbolized by the unicorn. It's the sign of the initiate, and it represents political power, while Leo, representing the sun, the lion, represents royal power. So the lion is the king of the jungle, and the rampant lion is the main symbol on the flag of the British royal family. The planet Saturn rules Capricorn, while the sun rules Leo, and Satanists and black magicians are heavily focused on the sun and Saturn in their rituals. The Illuminati believe the Saturn vibration has a much bigger impact on the earth than is recognized. In astrology, it's the planet of law and authority. Capricorn, the sign of authority, is also, according to astrologers, the astrological sign of England, that center of global control. The name Baphomet is said to have come from the Greek words meaning baptism, of wisdom, of knowledge, meaning initiation. And Dr. Hugh Schoenfield, one of the experts of the Dead Sea Scrolls, says the using of the code of the Essenes, the word Baphomet, can be translated to Sophia, the goddess of the Gnostics, and the Greek word for wisdom. Sophia just happens to be another name for female energy. Now, the Templars used the same code, Atbash cipher, employed in some of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Other accusations against the Templars were of killing children, teaching women how to abort. It's true that most of these confessions were made under extreme torture by the Roman Church Satanists at the Inquisition, but not all of these reports were gotten in this way. And the themes themselves so strong and the stories so consistent that it would be ridiculous just to dismiss them all. And one thing is quite provable. These very ceremonies involving the ritual murder of children and the use of women called breeders to produce babies and aborted fetuses for sacrifice to a demon god are most certainly performed today. Yes, even today. And this satanic structure of abuse and ritual murder is controlled by the very secret society network the Templars helped to expand. They all had to swear never to leave the order, to further its interests by any means, right or wrong. No crime committed for the honor or benefit of the order was considered to be too grotesque or sinful. It's the same with the inner circles of Freemasonry. Credo Mutwa, the Zulu shaman, points out that compared with the Freemason rituals he had seen in the United States and the United Kingdom, the voodoo, the black magic of Africa, pales in comparison. One of the passwords of Freemasonry is Tubal Cain, a descendant of the biblical Cain, of course, who was an Anunnaki crossbreed. Tubal Cain's sister, Namah, is said to have been the one who brought the human sacrifice and cannibalism into the world. Tubal Cain is known as the father of witchcraft, sorcery. That's why the name is a Masonic password. The G on the symbol of Freemasonry in reality stands for Gnosticism, knowledge, knowing. And for generation of fertility rites of sex cults of ancient Baal and Ashtoreth. No doubt it's also a symbol connected to generation and genetics as the bloodline of Cain. You see very same stylized G's in the logo of the Gannett chain, which has been buying up newspapers and television stations across the United States. They publish National Daily, USA Today. And the Medici bloodline, a very powerful family of the black nobility in Venice. That family alone produced 4 popes of the Catholic Church, 2 regent queens of France, and in 1531 the family became hereditary dukes of Florence. The de Medici bloodline funded Christopher Columbus's voyage to discover America. Catherine de Medici, one of the queens of France, was actually reported to have commissioned human sacrifice in a black mass in the 16th century. A young boy sacrificed, the blood used in a communion designed to save her dying son, Philip. Catherine de Medici wore around her neck a talisman with the name of the satanic demon, Asmodai, the one they sacrificed to get the results they required. Benjamin Franklin again comes up. A so-called pillar of the Christian Church and founding father of the United States of America, was a member of the Satanic Hellfire Club, as I pointed out earlier in the show tonight. And the bodies of 6 children, 4 adults, found under his former home in London, dated to the time he lived there. Adolf Hitler, the Nazis, Satanists. So were the opponents. Winston Churchill, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. together a grand blood sacrifice called the Second World War. Gave the demons what they wanted, so the demons gave back to the bloodline that caused it their reward, which is an expanded empire. The Rothschilds, formerly the infamous German occult family, the Bauers, apparently used the Canaanite satanic rituals, while some of the bloodline families, with long connections to the Celtic lands, like the St. Clairs, the Sinclairs as it's Americanized, preferred the Druid system. It was the satanic deity Ashtoreth which inspired the name. Astor, one of the bloodline families which have been heavily involved in Satanism, and one of the Pilgrim Society families of America. The Astors have close connections to the British royal family, and they were at the heart of the Profumo scandal in 1963, if you know about that, when the British Defence Minister John Profumo was forced to resign after lying to the House of Commons, about his involvement with Christine Keeler, a call girl, a hooker, who was also having a sexual relationship with a Russian KGB agent. And you can see she was extracting information from the British Defence Minister and giving it to the KGB agent during sex. Interesting how the elite operate. The Profumo-Keeler liaison was arranged by a guy called Stephen Ward. Not just any person. A sadomasochist and a black magician who lived in a house on the Astor Estate in Clifton, in Berkshire. Yeah, the same county as Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's great behemoth company, is named after. It's a Spaceman. This is Talk Radio, AM 640. This is the Spaceman on Talk Radio, AM 640. Show's AVFS. Final segment tonight's show. So as I said, the Astors, one of the Pilgrim families, known as the Pilgrim Society, group of families that came over very first ones to come over to govern the new Atlantis, which turned out to be America. That great Masonic plan to build it into an empire and then to kill it and make way for the new empire, which we're very close to see coming to fruition. What is called Satanism is the ruling hierarchy of the Brotherhood Pyramid under the command of the Illuminati. Like all the other parts of the network, it's strictly compartmentalized. The highest levels of the Satanic network lock into the highest levels of the Brotherhood of the Snake. But the lower degrees are not allowed to know the true nature of the organizations they are involved with. It's on a need-to-know basis. Now, one of the global centers of Satanism is the Castle of Darkness, the Chateau des Emerois, or Castle of Kings in Belgium, near the appropriately named village of Mounobel. The castle is close to the French border, and about, some 20 cliques from Luxembourg. It's protected from view by thick forests, you see, and guards keep out the curious. And on the grounds, cathedral with a dome containing 1,000 lights. I can remember quite a while ago, but I remember distinctly, and you may too, George W. Bush, then President of the United States, talked of 1,000 points of light. Well, he was speaking in code about this place of initiation I just brought up for the highest initiates, the Satanic Pyramid. In the Satanic Cathedral is the throne of the High Priestess of the upper hierarchy. Ceremonies are performed there to the satanic goddess known as Lilith, a demon in the Hebrew Kabbalah. In ancient Sumer, the Cain bloodline passed on through the female, symbolized as a lily, and the main demonic gene carriers were given names like Lilith, Lily, Lilitu, and Lilette. Are you ready for this? You know what the nickname for Queen Elizabeth II and her close family members are? Lilibet. Check that one out. Elizabeth is actually El Lizard Birth. It's a derivative of that. Another demon used by some mothers is called Bilar, Bilit. Other pronunciations. Kabbalistic names for the forces, for the force others call Satan. And that's what Star Wars does. That franchise. It pushes that word, the Force. It's God in the Star Wars franchise, the Force. May the Force be with you. They even have a pop culture thing they celebrate and bring that out every year just so everybody will keep it fresh in their mind. But for me, the true God would never force anything, but allow you to choose what you will choose. The freedom of choice. Only a demonic spirit would force you to accept and obey. It's from these lands in Belgium and North France that I've just talked about that the bloodline families come from, including the Bruces, to take over Scotland all those centuries ago. Belgium, this little country between France and the Netherlands, is also the home of the EU. It's also the home of NATO, and a massive computer center where databases on all the people in all the world are being compiled. It's known as the Beast. An elite mind control operation called the Janus Group is also based in the NATO headquarters. In ancient Sumer, Nimrod was known as Janus, the god with two faces, who was later known to the Romans as Janus. The reason that Belgium is a headquarters for Satanism and so many Brotherhood of the Snake institutions is very simple. The Brotherhood created Belgium for just this reason. In 1831, they imposed upon this area a demonic royal line, the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, the bloodline of the British royal family in Buckingham Palace today. Though its branch in Russia or Prussia, the supporters of Adam Weishaupt, who was the founder of the Bavarian Illuminati. The pedophile murder ring, which came to light in Belgium in 1996, is just one of the satanic networks operating from and in that country. It was organized by Marc Dutroux, who's connected with the satanic order of Abraxas, based in the village of Foch-la-Marche, near Charleroi, in southern Belgium. Not far from the Castle of Darkness, Abraxas is Abraxas, a fat-bellied demon from whom it's likely the magician's word abracadabra originated. Abraxas, by the way, has been placed in your mind too, not by the Occult, by Carlos Santana. That's one of his albums. Abracadabra has been showcased and brainwashed into many people's minds by Steve Miller of the Steve Miller Band, with a song called the same name. Abracadabra. Dutro, buried alive, an accomplice. Bernard Weinstein, and among Weinstein's effects was a letter from the Abrasax group, signed by someone describing himself as the Egyptian god Anubis. It ordered him to provide presents for the high priestess of the order and apparently gave specific details of the age and sex of the victims that must be chosen. The British Sunday Times reported the accounts of witnesses describing black masses in which children were killed in front of audiences, which induced prominent members of Belgian society. A Belgian newspaper actually reported that a former commissioner of the European Union was among a group of judges, senior politicians, lawyers, and policemen even, who attended orgies at a Belgian chateau organized by Michael Neul. One of the accomplices was Marc Dutroux, the alleged leader of the pedophile ring. One investigator said it was like going back to the Middle Ages. Human skulls found in the sacrificial sites identified by witness, particularly at the sect's headquarters. The satanic group behind the Belgian murders is said to be interconnected with similar rings in Holland, in Germany, and yes, also in America. In fact, there's not been an old, middle, or modern age when it comes to these rituals. It's been a seamless flow over thousands of years under the control of the same bloodlines. In truth, it's part of the global network which operates in all countries. Satanism, I'll have you know, is run like a transnational corporation. There's quite a few famous pedophiles and Satanists in Britain, too. One of them is Lord McAlpine, the former treasurer of Edward Heath's Conservative Party, an executive of the McAlpine construction empire. He also followed the late Jimmy Goldsmith as the head of the Referendum Party in Britain, which was created to hijack the groups opposing the European Union and leading them to glorious failure. McAlpine, who is heavily involved in a network of brotherhood secret societies, included the Freemasons, has been publicly named as a pedophile by the investigating magazine Scallywag. And of course, everyone knows about one of the most famous, Jimmy Savile, the Top of the Pops host for BBC for many years, involved in breaking all of the big acts in the 60s on television, bringing them on for the kids. He was, and they wouldn't reveal it until after his death, that he was a pedophile and that he ran a pedophile ring for the elites, lords, and kings and queens of England. I gotta tell you, this McAlpine guy is one of the elite bloodlines of Scotland, possibly connecting to the ancient Scottish king Kenneth MacAlpin. The McAlpine family has a long history of Satanism in its ranks, as does the Scottish Keswick family. Both are part of a web which operate across the whole world, into the Far East even, in Australia. A close friend of the McAlpines is Willie Whitelaw, a chairman of the Conservative Party at one time. He was also the deputy prime minister to Margaret Thatcher when she was in power, who was minded by Whitelaw, the McAlpines, and Sir Geoffrey Howe during her years as prime minister. When she had outlived her usefulness, the Brotherhood of the Snake, it was Howe who made this speech in the House of Commons, which effectively ended Margaret Thatcher's reign. Whitelaw was named as a leading Satanist by self-confessed Satanist Derry Mainwaring Knight at Maidstone Crown Court, 1986. And as usual, nothing was done about it. Mainwaring Knight lived near East Grinstead, one of the centers of Satanism in all of England. And in Scotland, a foremost satanic center is Loch Ness, near Inverness. Now you know why the Loch Ness Monster lurks. Yes, all seems well on the top at first glance, but when you look underneath, you see the grotesque wretchedness of the Illuminati. This has been A View from Space on Talk Radio AM 640. Coast to Coast is next. I'm Space, and I'm out.